Shalom, good afternoon, good evening. Shabbos is coming, but I just heard a miraculous story that I had to share with everyone, and I'll make it fast and sweet and hopefully inspirational for all of us. There was a family who left Eretz Israel. They went to America, and they did not have a Torah background, a Torah education for their children. And, well, what happened was a terrible accident occurred, and the father of the family was killed, and the wife and her children survived the accident and moved back to Eretz Israel. Now, this woman persevered and took care of her family and began to raise them, and one of her sons just really wanted to go to a religious school and learn Torah. These were people who did not have that background. And the young man just wanted to learn Torah. And so she sent him to a Torah school. And day after day, week after week, he could learn nothing. Nothing would sink in. He couldn't get the Torah. He had a certain amount of Hebrew, but nonetheless, he was failing miserably. The rabbis, the teachers didn't know what to do with him. And one day, he just put his head down on his book, crying. And he cried until he fell asleep. And eventually he woke up and he went home. He came back to school the next day and he opened up the Torah and he started to talk like the greatest sage of the generation. He started to bring sources and the sources of other sources. He started to do pilpul, which is asking questions and giving answers and asking new questions. It was like a different human being had entered that boy. And he knew Torah, and he knew all kinds of sources that he knew that he had never learned. So after, the rabbis heard him speak, and they were astounded. What happened? And so they went to him, and they asked the boy, what happened to you that suddenly now you know all this Torah? And he said, well, when I was sleeping, my father came to me in a dream, and he taught me Torah. And now I know all this Torah that my father taught me. And the rabbis started to think, and they remembered that his father was not a learned person, had not spent time with the books and the Torah literature that is so vast you cannot imagine. And they asked the boy, well, how did your father know all the Torah? Now he's teaching him from heaven, the father, to his boy who is sleeping and having a dream experience of learning Torah with his father. And he wakes up and has this amazing volume and understanding and grasp of our holy books. And so they asked the boy, well, how did your father get all this Torah? And he said, well, from the Torah that I learned down here in this world, that I didn't understand, he learned up there and understood completely. And even though he had not spent a life with the books, suddenly, everything that I learned down here that I couldn't understand, my father, who had passed away, understood it all. And then he re-taught it back to me in a dream. Now, are you grasping? It took me a while to get this, right? That the boy could not learn. It just wouldn't sink in. He fell asleep. His father came to him and taught him Torah. And then, where did the father get the Torah? That was the Torah that the young man had learned but not understood. And what does this teach us? Besides the fact, of course, that souls don't die and that our parents and our grandparents receive from what we learn. And we might never know about it until we go up there. But we have to understand we live on a living network, a living tree of soul that transmits information from above to below and from below to above. And when you learn here, you're giving merit to your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And when they learn your Torah, they're learning it without the boundaries of the physical world. And so it interconnects with everything else that they've already learned. And then they can teach it back to you if you merit that they show up in a dream. That doesn't happen too often, apparently. But the point, the one of the miracles of this story is for us to understand the expansiveness of knowledge when it's not bound in a human mind. And the mind of a wakeful person in this world can hold a lot of information, as we've seen. There are people that have miraculous memories and knowledge. But it's nothing compared to a soul without a body. And that is what the rabbis teach. Gadolim tzadikim b'mitatam michayehem. That the tzadikim, the righteous, are greater when they die than when they're alive in this world. Because death is only the shedding of the body, the shedding of the entrapment of the soul. And it's the freedom of our ability to receive from the highest levels. We should all think about this. And when we learn, remember, we're learning for others that are no longer here. And when we sleep, that we could receive things that we never knew we didn't know. So God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat. We'll see you next week on all the platforms, and should believe in miracles and you will see miracles. Shabbat Shalom.